Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to the Black Consciousness Festival and one of our conversations for 2020. Thank you for joining us on Zoom webinar or on Facebook Live. The festival provides a global online platform for the commemoration, celebration, and sharing of vital histories and stories that boost the awareness and impact of the pride, power, and practice of people of African descent. The festival aims to build awareness around how each of us can take the necessary steps for restitution and reparation. Your conversation lead tonight is Tyker Phillip, a creative entrepreneur based in Trinidad and Tobago. She has been involved in the creative industry as performer, stage manager, director, and producer for over a decade. In that time, she's worked with children, teenagers, and adults as a drama and theater arts facilitator and performed in many a lovely production. Welcome, Tyker. Welcome, Natalie. Welcome, Kibwe.
Hi. Since the beginning of time, in what we know as the world, blackness seemed to be a crime in the way stories were told. People was afraid of anything black and great stigma was attached to it. Blackness was constantly under attack. It's what the black man had to live with. The way how the world saw his color is what made the black man strong. They wanted to taint his character just to keep him down. A worthless kin is a black sheep, and a scoundrel is a black god. Black Maria is a jail jeep. Black magic man is a wizard. A Black Friday is a real unlucky day. A black mailer is a mean and vicious crook. Well, if you bounce up a black cat, run away, eh? And don't let no one put you in the black book. Despite all this, the black man did persevere, retained his pride, and maintained his dignity to gain respect and acceptance everywhere, to carve a place for himself in history. The black hand is like the mafia. The black republic is Haiti. A black painting mean obia, and black heart mean no sympathy. The English language don't like blackness at all, for almost everything black is negative. Destruction of these stereotypes is a call we have to see as something imperative. The black man have been under this far too long, suffering physically and mentally. And now it's time for the world to right this wrong and let him enjoy his place in history. That is an excerpt written by Winsford Devine and performed by the mighty sparrow Dr. Slinger Francisco from This World Don't Like Nothing Black. So we start off with the energy, we start off with the vibes. I am Tyker Phillip, I am your moderator for tonight's discussion, Youth, Black Identity and Civil Society, and I am joined by Kibwe Copeland from Guyana, president of IKEMBE, the Caribbean's first youth-based organization focused on reparation, and Dr. Nathalie Pierre in the USA, a historian of the African diaspora who has worked with Flanbwayan Haitian Literacy Project and undocumented Haitian neighbors in New York City. Welcome. Hi, Kibwe and
Hi,
Natalie.
hi, good night, good night.
Good evening.
So,
Good evening, Kibwe.
Good
lovely
evening.
to see you guys. Black consciousness is, in essence, the realization of the black man, by the black man rather, of the need to rally together with his brothers around the cause of their oppression, the blackness of their skin, and to operate as a group in order to rid themselves of the shackles that bind them to perpetual servitude. And that's a quote from Steve Biko. Whether you two know it or not, you are both champions of Black consciousness. So I'm going to start off the questioning with you, Kibwe. Have you ever thought about the idea of Black consciousness or that concept? And do you think it influences the work you do in your organization?
Yeah, most definitely. I think in my own personal life, before I was even aware of Black consciousness to say, I was always a bit, I used to always question things. I always wonder, and I'm on this path of self-realization. And on that path towards self-realization, there's this component besides self, me being a Black man, and how do I fit in? and being conscious about my race or my origins. So I believe that even in my organization, IKEMBE, which of course focuses on reparations and reparations for people of African descent, this whole level of Black consciousness helped me, of course, to put myself in or put my foot into such a, what the world might say, a very controversial issue. Because reparations, we know, of course, how controversial it can be, and the naysayers against it. So Black consciousness, or that consciousness about being an African person, about why I look the way I am, why I speak the way I speak, why I'm connected to certain things, it is something that, of course, has helped me. It's been the pillars towards my success in moving forward in this movement for reparations, or anything that surrounds my work, basically. So I think for sure it does.
And Natalie, what about you?
I think because I am a Haitian immigrant to these United States, in my household, there's always been this very intimate understanding of the Haitian Revolution. So before I could even think about it as something as abstract as Blackness, it was always my ancestors did X, Y, Z. And it's that's a very powerful thing when you're growing up when you're growing up as an immigrant and you're hearing one tale of your origin, and then as soon as you step outside of the borders of your household, there's this mongrelized thing known as Blackness. So it creates this type of cognitive dissonance. But because I grew up so anchored in understanding that the Haitian Revolution is the heritage of my ancestors, what I was told was Black, I didn't necessarily reject it or accept it. I just incorporated it into what my parents and my family were telling me about Haiti. And it's over time that I began to see my Haitianness as an extension of global Blackness. So that being said, everything that I understood as a descendant of Haitian warriors, I could then aggregate and spread across the global African diaspora. And that has always empowered me in how I move in all of the spaces that I move.
Vibes. All right. You'll come punching with the responses tonight, boy. Nice. So, on that note of understanding your Haitian heritage and where you've come from and where your ancestors have led the path, I know that your organization uses Haitian cultural forms to integrate young people into the school systems in New York. So, what has been the response to that choice that you've made within the community? And have you seen the use of those forms be efficient with the integration of students into that American system?
That's a wonderful question, Tyker. Thank you. Well, just to give a little bit of context, the organization that I work with, the Flanbwayan Haitian Youth Literacy Project, it had been in existence for about a decade before I was recruited to be on the board. I would have never found out about an organization like Flamboyant without the devastating impact of the 2010 Haitian earthquake. So I am a survivor of the Haitian earthquake. I was in Haiti to do archival research on my dissertation about the 19th century. And then this earthquake happens. And when I come back to the US, I'm trying to be as useful to my community as possible. And it's through that utility in my community that I was recruited to the Flamboyant Haitian Literacy Project. So the response to that choice was mute. But that organization is a pillar in my neighborhood in Brooklyn, New York, to help immigrant Haitians who are teenagers get the type of education that they need. Now, when we're talking about the integration of Haitian immigrant students, it's a massive challenge. I grew up in the era of HBO, not the television program, but Haitian body odor during the time of Aristide's coup d'etat. And there was a lot of bullying that was rampant, not only among my peer group, but at a national level, because the United States Center for Disease Control declared that Haitian immigrants, heterosexuals, and homophiliacs were responsible for the AIDS epidemic in these United States. So based on that experience coming up as an immigrant, that gave me a set of experiences to help this new wave of Haitian immigrant children integrate. And our shared site of trauma was the earthquake. So how do you talk about the earthquake when in Haitian culture, Black diasporic culture, resiliency is such an important thing? You are strong. You are the descendant of Haitian warriors. What is this PTSD thing that you're talking about? So when I started working with the Flanbwayan children, this was the site that we were using, and we began to use Haitian cultural concepts to talk about the earthquake. And in Haitian Creole, the word is gudu gudu. And it's when you listen to the rumbling in the throat of that word, gudu gudu, this is how it feels when the ground is tearing apart beneath your feet. So when we begin from a simple word that then expands to, okay, what do we culturally do with that sort of vibration? We dance, nous bat tambour, we beat the drums. So we have this amazing dance troupe at Flamboyant that enables Haitian migrant teens and Haitian Americans to emulate that rumbling from the gudu gudu, but also the rumbling from the tambour, the drumming tradition that is all over the African diaspora. It is when they're learning to dance together, they're learning the rhythms that they're beginning to see. So what if I was born on the island versus in these United States? This rhythm, this pulse, it's universal to we. And when the students have that confidence that they can be we, whether here, whether back home, that is then when we can begin the conversation about assimilating into a hostile, anti-Black US society.
All right. Wow. I'd love to see some of the footage of the dances though. I'ma go Google. I'ma go Google. And as Dr. Pierre is talking about strength, Kibwe told me that IKEMBE means strength of the people. So we're gonna stay in that trend. I want to know from you, Kibwe, what is your rally cry or your sales pitch to get young people involved in the conversation and also the action with regards to reparations in the Caribbean?
Well, I'll first start off with a slogan which says, they stole us, they sold us, they owe us reparations now. It speaks directly to what happened, in a little nutshell. People of African descent across the Caribbean and across the world didn't start where we are today. We started off in Africa. Of course, I'm not the best historian to tell you exactly how it all happened. What I know for sure is that we were taken from that homeland, Africa, and we were taken across the world to work for free. We were taken away from our families, we were taken away from our homeland, we were stripped of our culture, our beliefs, our customs, our morals altogether, our languages, our names. And we were given different names, different places of abode, and we were just put to work. And even after the Emancipation Proclamation, we were left with nothing, but were asked, to start life. You're now free. Well, I'm not too sure exactly if someone can actually give you freedom, if that's how it works. But our organization, IKEMBE, which was started only in 2017, a fairly young organization. But the organization, even though it's been fairly young, reparations is something that's been championed for years. And now at this particular time, it's very important for young people to play a part within this movement. Why? We understand young people are the majority across the world. And reparations should be championed by people who it would have benefited the most, because at the end of the day, we are the what should I say, the majority or the main victims to the legacies of slavery. When we look at today's society, and I know you started off with that poem which spoke about everything, hating everything black. And I remember one time we were speaking on a television program, we were talking about how they demonize the word black itself. And we look at even to our superheroes. We look at fiction movies and how everything powerful is on the white side. We only had Black Panther that gives us this sense of some kind of Africanness or some kind of strength as an African person. And then of course when we even look at religion, we look at Jesus, the white Jesus. We look at all the different religions. We see these white or these different images does not represent people of African descent. So our conditioning since we were small, since looking at cartoons, we were conditioned to see ourselves as below, as inferior to everything else. IKEMBE, of course, on his hand, reparations, which speaks, of course, repair, it speaks, of course, you know, you take something from me, you have to give it back. And of course, if you then look at the word reparations, it can be very complex. You have to then narrow it down to exactly what is it that you want, what is it that you really mean. IKEMBE focuses on education. Because one of the things that we know for sure is a lot of persons are ignorant of how that past enslavement period affects us today. Most people would say, you know what, forget about the 400 years of slavery, as in Guyana of 215 years, in some different islands or countries, they have a different period. People might say that gone long ago. I am young now, I have everything to my disposal. I could make a prosperous life. We have people like Obama, we have people like Tyger Phillip, all these African people who would have made, we have Akon who've done great things. But then when we look at the stats as how many African people have made it big, have made great successes, and what they had to go through just to get that great success, to the amount of people of other ethnicities and their portions, how easy it is for them to be so successful, it is questionable. Why we are in this position today is not because we are cursed. It's not because we are just not smart enough. We can't do business. We're not smart enough to get the right schools, etc. Because at the end of the day, there is a clear disparity between people of African descent and all the other ethnic groups, especially when we're talking about the white supremacists, or you could say the Caucasians, however you want to put it. We started with nothing. And I always like to make the comparison of putting 400 years of enslavement, whereby we were given nothing. We were not developing anything for ourselves, but for everyone else. Whereby there's the other hand, people who have been raping or free labor, taking our resources and building 400 years of wealth or creating a system that was never created for the people who helped build them in the first place. If you put that on the scale, we have no weight on our side. Our main focus when it comes to dealing with these disparities, when it comes to helping young people to understand where we are today and how that past time still affects us today, is look at the education system. Look at how we can educate young people, and goes back to consciousness. Consciousness is at the forefront of our movement, because if you're unaware of how slavery affects you today, you wouldn't be concerned. Why should I worry about slavery if slavery does not affect me today? Why should I worry about, let's say, the rain if I'm not going outside? Or why should I worry about the sun if I'm in a car that have cool AC, right? So unless you can link how things are connected to you presently, you might have least concern about it. So our main goal is to show young people, and trust me, young people are the most stubborn set of people to deal with, because we are more, we're more rebellious, we're more aggressive, we're on the move, and you have to become very clear to us, And being a young person, I can say that. So we have to find ways to speak their language. And it's not always about putting it in a book. Even though I would advise people to read, we understand that they like videos, we understand they like music, we understand they like poetry, drama. Meet young people where they are and try as much as possible to plant the seeds for them to understand where they are and why they are the way they are. Why do we have so much teenage pregnancies? Why are we prone to diabetes and hypertension? Why are we not getting all the big scholarships or the big positions? Why is it that even though we have presidents that look like us, we still did not get the benefit of most of it? These are things that we are trying to push. These are the things that are very important for us to conceptualize and, of course, make very simple and explain to young people. It is important that young people get involved in this movement. Very, very important. And as I said, you started off by saying it, IKEMBE means strength of the people. It's a Nigerian name. The organization formed in 2017 under the CARICOM Secretariat, along with Guyana's Reparations Committee. And we've been functioning across the Caribbean. It started in Guyana, but it does not stay in Guyana. It's something that should be moved across the region and also across the world. I don't know if I've given much justice to your question.
Yes, which actually ties into my next question for you, Kibwe, which is then how do you streamline the conversation in the Caribbean then when there may be other organizations who are trying to do the same thing? And when we had our pre-conversation, we did talk about the more groups they have, that sometimes things slow down, the progress slows down, or sometimes it just stops completely. So how do we now, as Caribbean islands, streamline the conversation?
And that is very true. You know, it's good that you bring that up back again, because a lot of times we have, and that happens across the Caribbean and even across the world. There's so many organizations that are trying to do the same thing, but it should be looked at as a good thing if we are trying to fight for one particular cause. But then there is this competition that comes among African organizations in Guyana, in Trinidad, in Suriname, in Haiti. And it's sad that Haiti doesn't have such a strong footing when it comes to reparations, having one of the most strongest cases. But there are too many factions and too many persons saying, well, I can do it better, or this is the way which we should do it. There's a need for us to come to the realization that we can also be our own downfall. Yes, we understand we be enslaved. Yes, we know there are people who do not want to see us above the social system, etc. But let's acknowledge that, and also acknowledge that we also are the problem too, because we're not acknowledging. For example, you know, if you they say if you don't know is one thing, but when you know, it's another. We have to find a way to come together. And when I spoke about IKEMBE, I remember speaking in the pre-conversation about having one brand and one cause. Because sometimes, if we're going to go to church, just giving an example some people could relate to, and we singing some kind of hymns, and you're singing one hymn, you singing three hymns, different hymns. Within the church, it's going to sound like sheer mad people within the church. We have to be speaking from the same hymn book. So it's very important for us to come to one particular position. And I believe that the only persons that can actually bring that, and some old folks might come after me for this, but are the young people. Because I believe at this present time, not shooting my older folks, they are geniuses, they are powerful, they are very wise. And because of them, we are so knowledgeable that we are today. But I believe that the young people have to come in as a tiebreaker to break these tension among some of the old folks who are still in their old ways. And that's something that we have to break. Yes, we're not moving from old tradition, but we have to also understand that the times are changing in the 21st century. We're in the information stage. So there's a need for us as young people to come in and have this conversation. Why is it that we had the reparation movement for so long, but yet still we are in this position? Not saying it's not moving, but I'm saying we have to look at the reparations movement. We have to look at Black consciousness in its whole and understand that we are the downfall to this movement moving forward most of the times. Because, and just to put a quick point in there, I don't want to go all over the place, but let's say the people who are against us, the suppressors, people who would say, you know what, let's be ignorant. Let's make sure that they continue to hate themselves, hate the whole Black consciousness, etc. They would like when we are divided. They would love when we are fighting among each other or trying to race against each other to see who can do it best, because that is what's keeping us down. So for us, from the standpoint of IKEMBE, we are not trying to, when we collaborate with other organizations, even if you have a different point of view, we try to come and have that conversation and see where do we come together? How do we coordinate? I think we even spoke about me trying to champion in medicine or champion in law. I wouldn't try to do all of that. My focus is reparations. I'm going to work on building the case. If I need legal advice, I will collaborate with somebody who has legal expertise. If I need health advice, I'll collaborate with somebody who has those medical expertise. It's important for us to cushion each other than try to compete with each other. Jack of all trades and a master of none. That's the last thing we want to become.
Definitely. So Nat, then that brings me to you now. And what has been your experience in terms of collaborating with other Black youth-based organizations in New York and, of course, across the diaspora?
Well, my experience collaborating with youth organizations, first it's anchored in Flamboyant, but I'm also a teacher, and I've gotten the chance to formally teach a handful of Black students who are strident young activists in themselves. But the students who I typically have who are activists, who are organizing, they're typically organizing for US based concessions. So Black Lives Matter, Me Too, what is it? The Occupy Wall Street. So this concept of the 1% versus the 99%. And I imagine I'm still young. However, my students typically push me in ways that I know that as a young person working in intergenerational spaces my entire life, they push me. So I just want to put as a parenthetical, one of the places where I was pushed by the young Black students that I work with is the concept of gender pronouns. When we are sitting in a classroom, why does it matter if the author is a he or she? It's simple to simply say they, them, their. And at the time, I used to be an English major. I was like, but that's grammatically incorrect. But I realized by trying to impose a concept that to young people is no longer valid, I was shutting them out. And anything that I could impart in them, because I was unwilling to use a different term, they could not hear me. And that just really made me think about the types of intergenerational conflict that I've experienced when I was a young person, or maybe am still a young person, and how I'm trying to pull other young people in. So I think that when I'm working with Black youth now, particularly during the era of Zoom, where I can just mute myself so I can listen, because they're coming up with these innovative ideas that challenge the way that our elders and older people, I'm looking at myself right now, see the world. And that's a beautiful thing. And what I can provide them is concrete examples of how our elders and even our ancestors failed around this issue of factionalism that Kibwe was just talking about. So, and I'm gonna give myself 30 seconds to do this history lesson on Haiti. Factionalism is what destroys the Haitian Revolution. So after our ancestors, so the anniversary of the conclusion of the Haitian Revolution was this past Wednesday, 18 November, 2 days before our Brazilian comrades celebrate Black Consciousness Day. And we know what's going on in Brazil right now, right? So after they defeat the white people, they are looking at each other and they have swallowed the poison of whatever their imperial masters had told them about themselves. And then they put their machetes, they put their bayonets, they put their guns on each other. We see these types of examples over and over across the African diaspora. So I ask, why did the West Indian Federation fail? That would have been a very powerful tool to articulate the region's reparations conversation, right? I remember hearing Hilary Beckles talk about this over a decade ago. Now we have a reparations movement in these United States that is very national focused. And this is a problem, because when we're thinking about reparations across the African diaspora, if we are thinking that the boat that our ancestor got dropped, no, the boat stopping, whether it be in the Caribbean, whether it be in South America, whether it be in the United States, if we begin thinking about where the boat stopped as the limit of our reparations demand, we're asking for way too little. So that's where I'll stay with that.
Yeah, all right. I mean, Kibwe, I hope you have your notebook. Take some notes. Yeah. Well, you did mention there, Nathalie, that in dealing with young people, you have to not shut them out. but sometimes the space could get a bit loud. And this is a question for both of you. In dealing with with people, we know we have to deal with personalities. We have to deal with cultures. Do you have a ritual to deal with the crazy moments or the crazy days that you are willing to share? This is the part of the panel where I mark your business. For our diaspora brothers and sisters, this is where I get a little curious. I Marco.
Kibwe, do you want to start? Go ahead, Kibwe.
Yeah, doesn't matter who starts. I think that for me, when it comes to dealing with different personalities, you have to come to realization that you're not going to meet everybody's not going to be like you. Everybody's not going to want to even be concerned about something that they might should have concern about. And you start to look at it as, for example, when we make plan with different avatars. We understand there are different type of people out here. And let's talk specifically when you talk about young people. They're going to be young people who are going to be least concerned about anything that you'd want to come and tell them about. Reparations? No, we're not concerned about reparations. Are you going to give me money? Is the reparations going to give me money tomorrow? Are you going to give me a job? That's the question they would ask you. They're going to be the young people who are going to be, well, let's say the scholars, who are going to ask you all the type of questions. And no matter how many times you try to answer the questions, they will, of course, put away everything you said and come another way, try to be devil advocate and say, you know what? But why this and why that? Because their concern is basically how they can counter what you're trying to say. They're going to be another set of young people who are going to be concerned, who are going to keep asking questions because they want to be a part. They want to understand what's going on, right? Of course, there's going to be the young people who are going to want to be a part because they think it's something that they can become popular of being a part, or maybe get to meet people who are of a certain status, etc. And these are things that you cannot run from. These are things that you have to deal with. What we have to do is just to accept the fact that these people exist, and that you're not going to find, not everyone I talk to is going to speak or think like Kibwe Copeland, right? So when I go out there, we meet people where they are. You meet them to their level. Of course, I might not be the expert to know how to deal with everyone, but I'll try my best. And that is something that you will have to constantly do. There's no one particular way in how you deal with these different personalities, because sometimes some people have some split personalities altogether. So the best thing, of course, is to stick to your truth. This is what you're about. For example, I'm for reparations. I'm for Black consciousness. I am for self-realization. And I would create different modules that speaks to different types of people. If you are intellectual, I know how to speak to intellectual people. If you are somebody who I wouldn't want to call not an intellectual, but somebody who's more on a more average scale, I know how to deal with you. Somebody who speaks Creolese, you have to know how to deal with them. It's very important for us to just have a strong stand and be very clear. And the downfall would come when you're not clear about what you're trying to sell, or clear about the movement that you're, of course, being a part of. Because if somebody comes, no matter how somebody comes to me, I'm going to be able to have an answer. Even if I don't have the answer, I can direct them to someone who will have the answer because I'm clear of what I'm doing. So it's very important for you as an individual to build your capacity to know the ins and outs of what you are championing. I'm championing reparations. I should know what reparations mean. I should know about the different reparations movement. I should know about different rebellions. I should know about what is happening within the atmosphere. So no matter how you come towards me, no matter what personality, no matter what is your cause, I will be able to communicate with you. And this is something that we deal with every day. On this panel discussion, I'm sure there are going to be persons who are going to ask questions. Persons are going to ask questions according to what they think and how they feel. Everyone has a different experience. Somebody who is dark, somebody who is light skinned, somebody who may not have not faced any type of racism, or somebody who have faced racism in some way, kind. So I think it's just about you, the advocate, or the teacher, or the professor, whatever it is, working on their capacity to deal with people in general.
I have to apologize. I am a true petite of Dessalines. My default mode is Coupetet Boulekai. So dealing with people in organizational spaces, I have had to create mountains of protocols because again, my default is Coupetet Boulekai. So these rituals, it first begins with physical movement. So I personally am a very cerebral person. I try to stay out of my emotional arena as often as possible. But when I look at the movement practices that are inherent in voodoo traditions or any other African syncretic religion, so I'm talking about Obeah, I'm talking about Candomblé, right? Whenever you look at those traditions, there is a movement element before you can be in communication with the Loas or the Orishas. So I look at my own rituals in that same way. Before I go into this organizational space and coupe everybody's set and boule this whole house that I quite frankly need to do this work that I'm about to do, I incorporate a movement practice that is authentic to me. That is not dancing. Tyker, we discussed this during the pre-conversation. I am team Rusty Waist. So my physical practice is the Indian tradition of yoga. So when you're looking at Hindu philosophy, part of the reason these people are contorting themselves in all of these random postures is so that any physical obstruction can be removed so that they can be in alignment to communicate with God. So before I go into any organizational meeting, frankly, before I go into work, I have to do this also, because then it creates a freedom in my body that then allows me to speak authentically from my desire, which is self-determination from Black people. So, and I'll conclude here. This is something that I grapple with a lot. How can we talk about freedom if we do not know freedom in the body, if we do not know freedom in the consciousness? Because one of the things that haunts me in my own professional research is my ancestors did this extraordinary thing as it relates to human rights. You, as a Black person, have the right to own your body, but that is different from freedom, right? Saying that I own my body is not the same thing as I am free to imagine an alternative future. So, picking up where I feel my ancestors left off, my goal when I walk into organizational spaces is to model freedom in the body, because then there's freedom in the throat, so I can speak in the way that my ancestors are supporting me to speak. Yes.
That's amazing. It sounds like you do a warm up, just like I would have done my vocal warm up for tonight. Yes, get those tongue twisters going so that everybody in the world will be able to understand what I'm saying and I don't sound completely Trinidadian. Yeah. So you guys both have resumes for days. You have a CV as tall as the Empire State Building. Look at the eyebrows. But if you had to choose one moment that resonated with you or that was extremely powerful, what would that moment be? Or an absolutely rewarding moment in the work that you do? What would that be? Take your time.
Honestly, I have so many. Um, I have so many. The most recent one is partnering with members of my Brooklyn Haitian community at the start of COVID-19. And we made the decision to raise $30,000 for undocumented Haitians in our neighborhood. And in the initial conversations, one elder said $2,000. And I remember feeling it in my gut. Where are we going to get this $2,000 from? And then someone else came in with $40,000. And I was like, oh, Mizami Woy, these people are crazy. But as we worked through it, we began to realize Fos Point Yetnu. And this is a direct quote from the Haitian national anthem. And force poignette means the strength of your arm. And seeing the money come, like there's a Haitian expression, I'm gonna put it in the chat, by piti pa shish. And pretty much that means even if you give small, that doesn't mean you're stingy. So the bulk of our donations were like $10. Like that was the average donation size, $10. And we're able to raise $27,000 in 6 weeks in a community that is economically marginalized. You know how they say life, art imitates life, et cetera, et cetera. So as this money is coming in, and I was functioning as treasurer, so I see the money coming in, and frankly, I was in this living room, doing the song Pronouns all over, like, oh my gosh, people are actually giving us this money. And it was a true testimony of the strength of your bicep. If you flex that muscle enough, it's practice. So that gives me great conviction that whatever space I walk into in terms of working with Black people, whatever failures that I might see in the beginning, we just need to flex that muscle, keep flexing it together. And it's like anyone in here who works out, you know that after you have a good workout, the next day that lactic acid is gonna get you, but don't run from it, because that means you're getting stronger. So that's the most rewarding moment right now.
I honestly love hearing you talk, Dr. Perry. The way in how you go into detail and you bring out all the emotions, it's something, I do admire it, and that's like to give that compliment. And for me, one of the most humblest moments for me, and I agree, well, I would come on the same page with Dr. Perry when it comes to there's so much. But there's this particular moment when I first went to Africa. I went to South Africa, went to Cape Town. I was there for a conference, reparations and reconciliation and reparations. That was in 2018. And after the whole conference and everything was over, I took a trip up to the Table Mountain, and I went on top, this high peak of Africa, and I looked down. And of course, there are many tourists there, there's some African people like myself, etc. And at that particular point, I believe that everything came flashing. I started to look back at where it all started for me, and even to my life story. I grew up, of course, I would say very fortunate. And then my father was left the scene, and then, life went downhill. I could have taken so many other avenues in life besides being who I am today or doing the things that I do today. But there's something within me, I would like to believe my ancestors also had a part of this, that kept me on a path, that kept me strong, that kept me Black conscious. So I kept on going. I worked. Even before I'm one of the persons who started tertiary education late, not because I wanted to, but because I had to start working before I could take that leap. So I started to look at my whole life's path, and I started to look at how things move forward. I even look at today, on discussions and these kinds of things. You start to reflect on your life itself. And I could remember on that particular mountain there, I was like, I'm in Africa. This was a dream for me, of course, to touch back the land of my ancestors. We always talk about going back to Africa, the motherland, we've been stripped from it, etc., etc. And I was like, Kibwe, you're here today. And everything made sense at that particular time. Why do what I do today is not because, something that somebody just told me about it and I think I can do it well. I firmly and I strongly believe that I was guided spiritually to this particular task. And I believe when I do it, I don't do it alone. Just as my friend Dr. Perry would say, she speaks about our ancestors, or ritual, yoga, and all these different things. I believe in the same. I believe that we are being channeled to continue the work that they would have started. And on that day in the mountain, I made an oath to myself to make sure that I keep faithful to it, and do not allow when everything starts to become popular and all these kind of things to, get all fussed and believe that you're big and risen. Make sure that you remain humble to who you are, and don't get caught up with the light, if any light is going to come anyway. But to be true to your story and be true to what you were doing. So I believe that was one of the most humblest moments for me. And I remember sitting on that mountain for a good while, just looking down. It's a very beautiful sight. I wish I could share it right now with you guys, but it was a very beautiful sight. Looking down on that mountain, looking down on the, this big landscape of Africa. And it's sad to know that yet still in Africa, we are not still at the top of, we're still in a position which I would say is demeaning. We don't own all the lands. The wineries are still controlled by the Caucasians. I could remember the apartment building that I was staying in, I was the only Black person. They were shocked because I wasn't a gardener or a cleaner. So that's our present situation, not a present position for African people across the world, not only in Guyana, not only in the Caribbean, but across the world. And I think it's very humbling to know that I can add my voice, my talent towards such a movement. So I believe that was one of the most humblest times for me.
Vibes. And I guess that keeps you motivated and committed to continue the work that you've already started. And so that actually brings me to the next question I have on my list, which is do you think institutional memory and knowledge is important? And are you legacy planning? And that question is for you and for Natalie as well, too, because we get older and we leave these organizations, and then what next? So, do we are we doing any legacy planning in here? I know I am. I don't know about you guys.
I don't know if you want me to start, Dr. Perry. If you, well,
Please call me
institutional
Natalie.
knowledge. Natalie, okay, I got you. So legacy. The legacy that I have in mind, the legacy that I've always had to the forefront. Wasn't always clear about it. It's not a structure. It's not um, a big building filled with money and all these kind of things. But I would like to leave a legacy of a module, if I like to put it that way. Maybe I find a better way to describe it sometime down the line. A module of how that people like myself can follow to help them find self. It is my formal belief, my very strong belief, that self-realization is the key to success for anyone. When I got on this whole journey of self-realization, I wouldn't want to say I was a lost young man. I think I was very inquisitive. I was very curious. And being the curious person that I am, I was always trying to figure out who I am, what is it I really like doing? I did a lot of things. Trust me, I did a lot of things. More than what you see on my CV, I did a lot of things. So I went into this whole thing. I started to read books. I started to watch webinars, videos, and how can you find self? How can you get in touch with that inner being? And that's when I started Clear Path Organization, which focused on self-realization and helping young people to find self. It comes with the concept that once you know what you're not, it's better to know what it gives you a pay, or knowing what you're not helps you to know who you are, or to know what you are. And I believe that one of the things that is missing from a lot of people's life is that component of knowing self. It's like you have a toothbrush and you're unaware of what to do, or unsure of what to do with the toothbrush. So you start to, you can scrub the tiles with it. It can be used to scrub the tiles. You can use a chair to do exercise, but it was made for sitting. You can use a car tire to play a game, but it was made for a car. You can use a fan to, let's say, cut grass. I don't know how successful you would be, but it was used to blow air, or give you cool breeze. So it's very important to know what you are here for. What is your purpose? It is my strong belief that despite we might be simple, or we might be similar in ways, I'm a man, you might be a woman, we might have same color skin, might have same morals, like the same music, come from the same temples, church, mosque, etc. There's something with each and every one of us that is different, that is unique, that we were gifted with something to give to this world that no one else can give. And I believe that it's important for us to find whatever that is, and give it to the world before you die. Miles Monroe always speak about, the most wealthy space in the world is a big graveyard. Most persons never have the chance, or never had the motivation, or maybe the advice to go in touch or be in touch with yourself. So we start change the world, we start change ourselves at the end of the day. We end up in jobs that we are mostly miserable most of our lives. We end up in relationships that we don't like. We end up doing things that we wish we never did, because we never took that chance to find out who we are and what is it that we come to bring to this world. So for me, even in my organization, IKEMBE, we talk about reparations. I believe that the first step for reparations that any African person should have, or the African people should have, is that knowledge of self, because that's where we're destroyed. If they give us money tomorrow, they will succeed. We would fail because we would not know what to do with it. Yes, we might have a plan, but the majority of people are not on board with our plan as yet. So they're going to spend it out and give it back to the same people who took it from us in the first place. So unless we can psychologically, mentally, spiritually find self, be grounded within self, and as besides personal, then to also be grounded as an African person and our origins to Africa, I think we're doing ourselves a disservice. So for me, my legacy, whenever that time comes, I must leave a module that people can follow to help them, or have a, I would like to go through all the hard work and how I would help to find myself, how is best to do this thing, and leave a more easier way for somebody who's going to come after me, so they can follow this module and say, you know what, I'm grateful that someone can actually have some steps for me to find my, we hear a lot of gurus talk about this, that, this, that, this, that, but I would like to help, or to add my bit towards that, especially as an African man to African people, because I believe we have less people who are actually concerned about, or what should I say, our blackness. I'm more concerned about us as a people, as a person. No, you're a person. Forget about being black. You're American. You're Asian, or you're Chinese, wherever you're born. But at the end of the day, my origins is Africa. My origins, I'm black. I'm African. So I don't know how much it resonates with the viewers, but that is something that I'm strongly, 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 strongly would like to bring forth in this life.
All right. Nat?
This word legacy, that's a big word. I'll chunk it down. Institutional memory is something that I think about a lot in my role as a professional historian. I've had the opportunity to work at a repository for Black culture and history, the Schomburg Center. So pretty much what I did during that time was stalk the elders of Haitian organizations and beg them to give us their papers, right? Because I do think that having a written record is very important. Otherwise, I wouldn't have a paycheck if people did not leave their records for me and other historians to be professional gossips. Let's be clear. That's what being a professional historian is. When it comes to the question of legacy, that's a bit more challenging. But as I think about the dance groups in the Flanbwayan Haitian Literacy Project, I remember on my time on the board, I would be fighting with the executive director over, why are we spending this much money on dancing and this much money on actual literacy programs? Like, we would just bump heads. She always won because, she understands the work better than I do. But why we spend so much money on the dance group, on the folkloric group, on the poetry group is that when the students engage in a physical manifestation of freedom, that is an internal legacy. When you speak to people who work with their bodies for creative expression, they'll tell you, like, there's a moment when they're in the vibe where they feel so free, they feel so liberated. And over time, I began to understand that investing in cultural movement might be an act of institutional memory. Because if you can remember what it feels like to be free in the body, through dance, through poetry, through music, whatever, that is a legacy that you can naturally carry forth wherever you go. True story about New York City. We have trains, and in the US, patriarchy allows men to feel more free than women, right? I'm just giving you a little example of what I mean about freedom in the body, right? So you get on the train and these men, they're spreading their legs so wide, taking up all of the space. And when you try to sit next to them, they immediately look as if they feel infringed upon, because having the freedom to spread your legs in a public space, this is something that you carry with you everywhere. It can become oppressive, maybe, maybe not. But I think that when we're looking at cultural heritage, if you can teach the young people how to be free inside the body, this is one of the reasons why I love the carnival traditions, whether it be in Trinidad or Brazil. But again, Team Rusty Waist. But when you know that feeling, you know, once Mardi Gras is over, you go into this period. And from my understanding, part of the reason that you do the Bacchanalia is so that you can go into the sacred season in peace, because you've let out all of the stuff that needs to be let out. So even though I would like to collect everyone's paper matter and put in an archive somewhere, I now realize the importance of feeling freedom in the body, because that activates the spirit. And once you have someone's spirit trained to liberation, they're unstoppable. I done, Tyker.
I was macroing in the chat. So so this well, we don't have summer, but during the middle of the year, the Black Lives Matter movement kicked into hyperdrive after the murders of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. So I'm wondering if we who work in civil society organizations should use the momentum of movements like BLM to educate young Black people, you know, and how would that educate, like, what would that education look like? You know, how do you tell young people that Black is beautiful? Okay, right, I've heard it a million times, but how do we tie that into the work that we do in a really effective and efficient way? I mean, you know, Kibwe mentioned meeting them where they are, going to their level, whether it's in music or in graphics or artwork. But how do we use the momentum in these spaces that we're in?
I believe it's necessary for us to use these momentums. Like, for example, like what happened to George Floyd. That is not something, as an African organization, if you did not make a statement or seize that, which I wouldn't want to say an opportunity. It was something that we don't really like to think about. That how, you know, I can remember when we were enslaved, we were half man, half beast. We killed us like flies. And today, in this day and age, 2020, we can still see such acts. But something like that, we cannot be quiet about. We must speak out about. And when that tragic, senseless murdering of George Floyd happened, my organization, IKEMBE, of course, collaborated with an organization that was formed because of that particular killing in Guyana here, called the Black Lives Movement Guyana. And we went out and protest. And more than just protest, we wanted to remind the people that this is where we are today. Slavery has gone, but today we have our African people being shot, unarmed, walking away, you know, things that people who are white do every day. I can remember watching one video which was very applauding, whereby there was this white guy and some white police officers, and they were having a back and forth. And the police officer started shouting, "Don't you ever spit on me again." And I was like, he spit on you? And he's not dead. We walk away and we're dead. We look too strong on them and we're dead. So it's very important for us to use these momentums to help people, well, to help channel, because sometimes it takes, you know, it takes such events to help push a movement. We're not saying that we'd want such things to happen, but it opens that kind of worms. You know, we've been talking about it, but until some people experience it, they wouldn't believe it. And that is the sad part. You know, we hear stories about what happened back then, how people been treated, how African people have been treated when you couldn't sit in the same buses with white people, couldn't use the same toilets, you were lynched, etc., etc. But then to see something in your current time to happen that shows you or to relate to exactly what we were telling you about opens your mind. It's like, wow, this is similar to the story that they told us back in the day. So it's very important for us to use these momentums. Sadly, that we have to be using momentums. I wish we could use momentums of more successes of African people. Why not be a tycoon? Look how much African tycoons there are. We have, more billionaires, more than this. We have Jay-Z, we have Kanye West, but there are more billionaires every day. No, we have to hold the momentums. Like a guy got shot, somebody got killed in their bed and it was the wrong house. These are the kind of things that we have to play with, which is sadly. But it's very important for organizations to relate and to, of course, speak against such crimes. Because if we go quiet, it's going to happen again and again and again. There's a strong need for activism, continuous activism. Because, if somebody does you something, let's, for example, I come to you and I just, thump you in your head and you say nothing. I'm going to feel like a thump in your head and you wouldn't say anything. I will make sure when I come again, I'll thump you in your head again. Right? They say if you bend your back, you can get right. In Guyana. Nobody's don't want to buy anybody's horse. And so it's very important, of course, to us to not waste time. When something like this happens, we have to stand up. What happened across the world when George Floyd got killed was remarkable. But one of the things that I wanted to spice very quickly is that I hope that African people understand it more. We had many people who come out in support of us, but African people must understand. I really supported the Black Panther movement. Why? Because the Black Panther movement was us protecting ourselves. This whole thing about asking for acceptance, I do not agree with. I don't have to ask anybody to accept me. I first have to accept myself. And people will respect me for who I am. So this whole thing about us going to beg, respect us, yes, Black Lives Matter. But it's very important for Black people to understand that Black Lives Matter more than anybody else. Because if we don't understand it, if we don't accept ourselves, why should anybody accept you? If we do not tap our brothers and our sisters on the shoulder and say, you're beautiful, you're powerful, why do we expect anyone to think of us as beautiful, strong, and powerful? So it first starts with us as individuals. So that's my take on it. It's very important for us as African people to understand we matter, that we are strong, and we should work among ourselves before asking anyone else to accept us or to think of us as a strong people. I don't know if I missed any part of your question, though. If I did, just let me know.
No, you didn't. You didn't miss. You didn't miss. You didn't miss a beat. Yeah, Nat?
On my end, no. Kibwe has me shooketh. I had an answer and then I'm listening to what he's saying and I'm thinking about other things now. But I'm gonna go back to the direct question. I think that protest movements are one way of affecting change. But I think that, no, I know that as someone who has been oriented in protest movements since I was 4 or 5 years old. So I mentioned earlier about the Center for Disease Control saying that Haitians, hemophiliacs, and homosexuals brought over the AIDS, HIV epidemic to these United States. And in April 1990, someone's gonna be upset with me with that date, but there was this massive protest on the Brooklyn Bridge. And all I remember about that protest was being absolutely terrified because there were so many bodies on the bridge that the bridge was rocking. That's the only thing I remember about that protest. And I haven't liked protest ever since. Okay, like I don't like it's not for me. But what I do realize about protest, it's like, you know, a driver driving on the road and they're honking their horn. Honking the horn does not get the driver to the location. It just means move out of the way so I can clarify the destination I'm going to, right? So as someone who has consistently been in civil society organizations, I don't need to be honking the horn. I actually would like to be paving the road so that the protesters do not need to honk so desperately. Because I truly believe that the moment you protest, you have exposed your weakness You have announced, I have no power, right? So when we do have these moments where people are honking their horns, I think it behooves of us, those who have been in the game, those of us who have been developing modules to the pivot on Kibwe's wording earlier. When you have the modules, you just sit on the road and watch the honker and say, hey, look at this module I created. Come talk. Because protest is not sustainable. Protest is not good for the health of Black people. So that's where I am on Tyker's question. But there was something that Kibwe was saying that I wanted to touch on. So this concept of Black Lives Matter is very interesting. So it's trademarked, right? Now, when you see Black Lives Matter, you see the little TM sign as a superscript near it. As a scholar of slavery, as someone who studies how our ancestors' humanity was reduced to a line on a ledger, it makes me uncomfortable that a movement is trademarked, that a movement can be capitalized upon. And I just want to know that before Black Lives Matter, BLM, that acronym, BLM used to mean the Black Liberation Movement. So in one fell sweep, you move from Black Liberation Movement to Black Lives Matter, which in my estimation is a lower step on the ladder to where it is that we've been trying to go since the first boats got us in the 15th century. So yes, Black Lives Matter is a very loud honking of the horn, but let's be clear, that is not the destination. That's it.
Thank you so much, for your honesty, Kibwe and
Say well
Nathalie.
said. That's what I was going to say. Well said.
Um, so, what would be a piece of advice, with all of that in mind, a piece of advice for young people who are now becoming aware of Black consciousness as they get involved in civil society organization or community-based organizations? What would be a piece of advice for them coming into this space?
Well, using some of the words that Natty would have used, stop honking the horn, sit down and, you know, come up with solutions. African people, we have to come to also realization that we can be the best at saying about complaining of everything that is wrong. Yes, we're in deprived communities. Yes, we've been enslaved. Yes, we this, yes, we that. We know these things. What is it that we don't know? Or what is it that we can do to change the course ahead? Of course, we must be knowledgeable of where we were to know exactly where we're heading. But I think it's very important for us to sit down and strategize, be strategic, come up with modules, ways to get forward. As I said, I'm not for the, please accept me as a Black person. I'm human just like you. Some people we have a lot of systems put in place, a lot of organizations put in place to say, yes, we accept you. And we also understand that those are also organizations that were made to put fresh paint on broken walls. But it's my belief that people of African descent have to make caucuses among themselves. This is not about, oh gosh, if a white person comes in the room, we're all shocked and afraid. That's another problem. It's about us understanding ourselves, understanding our present position. And that's the first step. Know where we are today and be very honest with ourselves of where we are today. And look at solutions and how we can come out of this particular pathway. And trust me, it's not going to come from somebody coming and make another, what should I say, another proclamation, liberation proclamation, or a Black Lives Matter proclamation. It's not going to happen like that. Freedom cannot be given. You can be only taken. You have to take your freedom. You have to own your freedom, right? Because today we don't have shackles and chains, but I'm telling you the truth. The mental capacity or the minds of our enslaved Africans who were in shackles and chains were more free than the persons who do not have shackles and chains in them today. We would jump off the ships and commit suicide because we do not want to be in bondage. Today, we would actually go and sit in jail if we were, if we were to come out of our comfort zone. That's how sad it is. A lot of us are in that position. So it's very important for us to understand where we are today and look at solutions, find ways, have the conversation. And that's one of the main things, have the conversation. We're not having a conversation. We all thinking about what we can do for ourselves. There's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I think it's very important for us to capitalize on that particular proverb. You know, if I should take my finger and I press at your shoulder, it's going to, let's feel like a press. I put the other fingers going to feel, big press. But if I take my fist, all 5 fingers together, my 4 fingers and thumb, and I hit you, it's going to be a punch. It's important for us to unify amongst each other. Stop complaining. Yes, we know all the complaints. Trust me, I know all the complaints. Well, I might not know all the complaints, but I know a lot of complaints. And from the amount of complaints I know, I think that we should come to some point whereby we come up with solutions. Yes, we have been wronged. Yes, we have been enslaved. Yes, they continue to kill us. Yes, but how do we counter these problems? We're not going to go there and protest and get any result. Yes, they're going to tell us, we want to see with you. They're going to have us in conferences. They're going to have a lot of conferences. And that's another thing that I'm not so for either. These conferences, it spends a lot of money, but does nothing really. But how do we change? How do we actually come with a solution? Let's do it. And it starts with me and you, with us 3 in this particular panel, and the persons watching this video. Let's be conscious. Let's stop playing around. Let's stop trying to be, let's try to stop. I'm going to try to outspeak Nathalie tonight because I am Kibwe Copeland. No, I must listen to every word she says because there's something that she's saying that I didn't know. Especially a lot of those when she started speaking those Haitian, the Haitian dialect. I really would like you to put those things in wording so I can go and research them. Thank you very much for that. So I think the way forward is us to start looking at solutions, looking at our problems, stop complaining to other people who would not help us because they have no intention helping us, and find ways in how we can course our way forward. That's my comments on that.
Okay, so what I would say to Black youth is actually try to learn yourself. So like Kibwe was saying before, like your self-realization is the first step. You may not even realize the extent of your oppression until you explore yourself. So for example, women, Black women, a lot of Black women do not realize that this concept of respectability politics actually oppresses them more than it liberates them. But it's something that was used by our ancestors in these United States, elsewhere in the African diaspora, this idea that if I present myself in this, middle class fashion, I will be accepted by my white oppressors. And historically, over and over, that has demonstrated that that is not the case. So I ask the Black youth to learn themselves. I am absolutely inspired by what young people do with the concepts that we older people, maybe older people, and actual elders share with them. I have an example of in the fundraising group that I participated in. I was the second youngest person, and the youngest person is a freshman at Georgia State University. And we gave her the national anthem to sing. And something that usually comes off as high orchestra, stiff upper lip music, she transformed it into this beautiful R&B soulful vibe. And for me, this is what I want the youth to understand. Everything that your ancestors have left for you, look at it as an ingredient, not a recipe. As someone who doesn't particularly cook, I find it fascinating that I'm gonna put this out there. But when you have a recipe for, and I'm just gonna speak from Haitian food, legume, it's a very popular thing. Every auntie's legume is going to taste differently. This one might like to use this spice more. This one might like to use more salt, and we never go there again because you don't do that. But the point is, you leave the ingredients out for the youth. You tell them what this ingredient is for. Violence is used in times of war. You pray before you go to war. You do this, you do this. And then whatever they do with it, we must accept it. There's this poet, Rumi, your children are not of you. Like, he gives you this image of an archer, and the child is the, what do you call this thing? The arrow. The child is the arrow, and the parent and the ancestors, like, you want to imagine the ancestors as the feet, the parent as the archer, and then you just shoot the youth off into the future. But they will not be able to go with the velocity that is based in their ancestry, that is based in their parental training, unless we let them go. So a lot of this like intergenerational conflict is supposed to happen, but it's not supposed to happen in the public forum. Because when it happens in the public forum, and we see this example with every independent Black country, once it happens in the public forum, you have an imperialist agent that begins to co-opt it, that begins to take it out, right? And we need to empower our youths. We need to tell them, you know what? We believe that we raised you right, so we believe that you're going to use the ingredients right. When we see this conflict, I think it means that the elders are not confident in the work that they've done. And that's something, excuse my cell phone, and that's something that needs to be healed, repaired, et cetera, et cetera. But my advice to the youth is to know yourself, like your unique self, and then take the ingredients that are on the table and mold it how you see fit. Because frankly, the elders will not be here in the future. But as long as you know what the ingredients are, and this is my hope as a non-cooker, maybe you'll have a successful legume at some point.
Oh, somebody really wants to get on to Natalie tonight. Um, so I'm just gonna take a look in the chat here. There's actually a David Banfield who said, Kibwe, your group was in Trinidad for Carafesta. That Carafesta was last year and gave good information. And he said the Orishas guide you. And then something you were saying, I'm guessing he said, he said, well said, Dr. Pierce. I think he agreed to something that you were saying, Natalie. Sean, do we have any questions from Facebook? Because it's now 8:19, about to be 8:20, and
No,
we're ending.
none from
No,
Facebook.
no questions. Oh my gosh. I know
Because
that's
you all are so on point.
thank you. Thank you.
I was
Thank
looking
you.
at Facebook, and I was seeing that people are quoting us. That was
Pops, there's people intellectual property there, you know. Don't be going and making no memes and saying that people intellectual property, you know. Right. That's a whole other black consciousness conversation, 20 questions conversations in 2020. This has really been an amazing conversation thus far. I don't know if both of you know, but Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, and the US all had elections this year. Y'all know
yes.
this?
We
And Trinidad and Tobago, we had like 2 days where the opposition didn't want to concede because they wanted a recount. Guyana had several months because you all voted in
we,
March.
we made we made history. We made history. We made history.
Yeah, and I'm
Yes.
guessing January 20th is when the US will know what's going on
Yes.
with them. But I say that, I make that statement to say that I'm hoping that in all of our spaces, we'll be able to access the people who have the charge of the legislation, etc., etc., to help us really further. Look at dog. Oh my gosh, Natalie has a dog. Sorry, I got distracted. I got I'm hoping that there are people in these spaces who have come out of civil society who will be able to put their hand in a broth with regards to legislature and making certain things accessible for civil society groups, like funding
Most
for us
important.
to for us to be able to move forward with a lot of the work that we're doing, and for us to be able to involve even more young people. So quick Mako here, what's on the playlist, the music playlist? Because working in civil society organizations is sometimes a thankless job, and we have to come down off that high sometimes, when we go to battle and we come back. What's on the playlist right now, Kibwe? What you listening to?
What I'm listening to, right? I was listening to Kofi Lockdown. Um, where do we go when the quarantine thing done and everybody touch road? Because of COVID-19, we had to look at everything, how we communicate, how we meet, how we're going to continue pushing this movement. We can't meet face to face. Everybody doesn't have the internet access. Everybody doesn't have the time. Some people are more frustrated. Some people lost their job. Some people are more disinterested. So because of COVID-19, we had to look at it and say, you know what? We can't allow COVID-19 to stop this, of course. It's not something that will stop us. So we then have to look at how we will move forward. Yes, this discussion is one way that says that COVID-19 isn't stopping us because we're still having the conversations via Zoom. And yes, we had change of governments. Yes, we might have change of officials, people who might have different thought spans to what we are advocating for. But we have to make sure that we hold them accountable. It's a silver, especially when we're asking for human rights, right? And then again, we have to look at the open societies and other organizations across the world who will support our cause. So for me, where do we go? It'll be during the quarantine and after the quarantine. How do we maintain this momentum? How do we keep grounded? How do we not allow COVID-19? Of course, stay well, stay safe, and stay alive. And make sure that you can continue to champion this cause. So that's what I'm listening to. Kofi Lockdown.
Paps, big up Jamaica. You understand? Natalie, what's on your playlist?
So I just looked, and the last song I listened to was Gyal Walk by Michelle Montano. Um, I find great joy in soca because it gives me levity. But then I forget what it's called, but it's like the gospel soca. What is that called? Like it's like church music to soca.
Gospel
Yes,
Okay.
I love it. It taps into my previous Christian existence. But I think what I've really learned during COVID-19 with this fundraising thing, the way that the media in the US presented COVID-19, it was as if it was the end of the world. But then I would speak to my Haitian community members, and they would just give you that slow blink that elders give you when they're like, you're such a child, calm down. Take your ginger, take your turmeric, stay inside, right? So that that very vigilant but calm energy is something that I'm taking out of COVID, and I'm already practicing it, but it's definitely going to be something that extends past COVID. But I just like as I've been thinking about COVID-19, I there's a Haitian maroon that lives deep within me that is cackling at the idea that the capitalist engine was stopped by something invisible. Like that maroon laughs every single time I look at the news. And it just makes the Haitian historian in me, the Dr. Pierre in me, remember that during the time of the Haitian Revolution, there was something called yellow fever, the yellow plague that was also going on. It would be irresponsible to make that type of connection as a historian, but that Haitian maroon who's sitting on the side of a mountain having the types of reflections that Brother Kibwe was giving us, it just makes me wonder, that rather than thinking about this moment as a moment of isolation, what types of partnerships can we build? This is one partnership that we've built. I honestly think that the Haitian partners that I had in the fundraising, we actually became a tighter community because we focused our energy on this one thing, as opposed to TPS, as opposed to housing insecurity, as opposed to what our president was doing on Monday through Sunday, right? It made us focus. And I think that's actually the blessing of COVID-19. And if we could keep in mind the things that we grew in during this time period and just make it standard. So I encourage everyone who's listening right now, partner up with 9 of your most solid people and try to raise some money. Not for your organization, just try it. Because when you see that you're able to do that in collective, it really changes your mindset. Like, did we really do that? Yes, we did. I have the receipt. It's right here. Like, it's powerful. And I think that is what I think, like, I like to think about time happening all across at the same time. This is not a professional historian approved message. This is the Haitian Maroon message, right? If time is happening at the same time, all the time, I just want to imagine my ancestors in Haiti, your ancestors in Trinidad or Guyana, who had very successful slave revolts during the time period of the Haitian Revolution. Can you imagine how delicious the mango tasted after they defeated? And I think that as we get to the other side of COVID, we need to eat that mango with the same relish. Like, we made it, we did that. And then if we can show that to our youth, the way that we celebrate, it's easier to make the youth love themselves when it's a joyous experience, as opposed to, do you know what your ancestors did for you? Like, come on, that's heavy, you know? Yeah, so it's taking the lesson, making it light in some way, and moving past COVID with that same vibe.
Awesome. I think mango dropping down your chin and your to your elbow is the perfect way the perfect way to wrap this discussion. Oh my gosh, I was so excited to do this, guys. I've been talking about it all week. I couldn't shut up. And then after I spoke to you guys before, I was like, Sunday gonna be vibes. It gonna be things. It gonna be things. It gonna be excited. All the tuning. Da 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 da. I had so much fun chatting with you, Kibwe and Natalie. Oh my gosh, we talk about mango. So I mean, it's not in season, but now I feel for mango.
If either one of you guys have mangoes where you are, please enjoy it for me. Like, it's hard out here in the Northeast.
I have mangoes right outside. So I will make sure I enjoy mangoes for both of you.
Thank you so much, Kibwe. So, did somebody just ask a question? Before we wrap? Okay, no, nobody asked a question. Okay, so this has been a Black Consciousness Festival, this panel discussion on uh, youth, Black identity, and civil society. I've been chatting with Dr. Nathalie Pierre, as she she just called herself, and Kibwe Copeland in Guyana, and Dr. Nats is in New York. Sean is back on Black Consciousness Festival. You guys follow Black Consciousness on Instagram, follow on Facebook. Get in touch. And of course, we have a couple more days for the festival. I have been Tyker Phillip. This has been a boss discussion. After not use expletives, I'm in a professional stance. And have a good evening, night, morning, wherever you are. Sean, take it away.
Thank you, Tyker. I mean, you said it all, and this discussion has been absolutely phenomenal. Thanks to all who joined us tonight. Tell a friend, tell a colleague, or a family member about the festival. We have 1 week left, so a few conversations to come up. Coming up this week, tomorrow, we have a conversation on resistance and restitution in Trinidad and Tobago's Carnival, featuring our new management, Paramount Blue Devils, Jordan Breaks, and Dr. Suzanne Burke. On Tuesday, we have a Dance with Your Daughter movement workshop available. And then on Wednesday, we have another conversation on faith, healing, and ancestry with Dr. Kira Malika Daniels and Caroline Amanda Borges out of Brazil. On Thursday, we have a limbo workshop that's available. And on Friday, some of our Brazilian friends will talk about the case of Afro Blocos in Salvador's Carnival. So we have lots of exciting things still coming up for the rest of the week. Tune in and find all info, links for registration for our events on our website at www.theblackconsciousnessfestival.com. Don't forget to submit the names of your ancestors you'd like to remember on our website's Ancestral Memorial. Thank you for joining and have a good night, everyone.
Okay.
Good night, everyone.